morning and welcome to LNG Marketplace Weekly News Flash. Here is the latest news we have selected for you from all over the media. Under Phase 1 of a trade deal between the world's two largest economies signed this week, China has committed to buying additional U.S. energy supplies, including LNG. But a 25% tariff imposed by China on U.S. LNG, which has pushed the price of U.S. gas above the spot market and restricted purchases, remains for now, while Washington and Beijing negotiate a Phase 2 trade deal. This we have read on Natural Gas Intel and Finance Yahoo. According to BusinessReport.com, an expected second wave of U.S. LNG exports should become clearer later this year when a number of proposed projects are expected to make funding decisions. The ongoing U.S.-China trade war will make it more difficult to fund second-wave projects if it is not resolved, as China is expected to be the fastest-growing LNG market in the foreseeable future. The sanctions imposed by Washington, targeting firms building the pipeline that will increase Gazprom's export capacity for Europe, were seen as either interference in Germany's internal affairs or a tool for deterring Russia's energy influence in Europe. The Trump administration is following an agenda of energy dominance. However, the fact that Germany and others are building new LNG terminals does not obligate them to use these terminals for U.S. LNG, as both Gazprom and U.S. LNG producers are at the mercy of market forces. This is stated by Finance Yahoo. The U.S. rich supply of natural gas may soon be transported by train, enabling energy shippers to sidestep congested pipelines in parts of the country. The technology has been used in Japan for almost 2 decades. Less efficient than pipelines, trains are nonetheless potentially a more versatile way to ship some LNG volumes. The proposal, however, has drawn critics concerned about environmental impacts and safety. This piece of news we have found on Financial Times. It took only hours after launching the first LNG freight futures trades on the New York Mercantile Exchange, NYMEX, to be executed. It is surely a sign of the demand for more risk management in the gas export market. The contracts allow traders to hedge LNG freight costs. For example, some LNG ships traded early last year at a low of $10,000 a day and broke $170,000 a day mark. So the risk management tool is particularly useful given this level of volatility as stated on natural gas. So a risk management tool is particularly useful given this level of volatility, as stated on Natural Gas Intel. Price for LNG is competitive to conventional fuels, even against heavy fuel oil. Also, the other element, which is the LNG bunker infrastructure, is developing quite dynamically with a number of orders placed. A view into the order books of shipbuilders around the globe shows that LNG-powered vessels are increasingly represented. Presently, Europe provides for the highest coverage of LNG bunker opportunities, but other regions are catching up. This we have read on Hellenic Shipping News. A giant LNG bunker vessel, which will be operated by French energy giant Total and owned by Japanese shipping company MOI, has completed sea trials in China. The ship is fitted with innovative tank technologies and meets the highest environmental standards thanks to the use of LNG as fuel and complete reliquefaction of boil-off gas. It will be followed by a second identical ship. This we have read on Oil and Gas 360. According to Hellenic Shipping News, South Korea power utilities are likely to be less tempted to import LNG directly from overseas suppliers by bypassing KOGAS, as the state-run gas company has decided to adopt a new domestic individual tariff system. Under the new regulation, KOGAS has the biggest purchasing leverage to import LNG on behalf of them, through which they can buy at lower prices. Emerging markets are the next big thing in the midst of a perfect storm of compelling long-term market drivers. Strong economic and population growth, electrification of transport and industrial systems, higher rates of urbanizations, energy and market reforms, and the policy pushing towards cleaner energy sources. As global economic growth shifts to Asia, Africa, and South America, billions of people will move up the economic ladder to a middle-income bracket, states LNGindustry.com. Gastrade, the Greek developer of a planned floating LNG import facility at Alexandroupolis in northern Greece, launched the process for binding bids for capacity in the project. The deadline for interested participants to submit their offers is February 24th. Greece already has one operating LNG import terminal which started operations in 2000, but the government is supporting a second plant as a part of efforts to become a regional gas hub, as we read on Hellenic Shipping News. South Korea produces a higher proportion from electricity from nuclear than anywhere else in North Asia. The 25% year-on-year jump in nuclear output, combined with an increase in renewable output and fall in overall electricity supply, squeezed gas-fired output. As a result, LNG used for power generation fell, which in turn accounted for much of the decline in total LNG imports, with arrivals falling by 10% year-on-year. This is stated by Natural Gas World. Pakistan represents a market that could take advantage of the low spot price environment and import more LNG to feed its growing natural gas demand. However, imports are close to capacity and have limited ability to grow significantly. Pakistan is now moving towards the next phase of LNG import capacity expansion with government approvals for 5 new terminals, while also taking steps to further liberalize its natural gas sector through third-party access to distribution infrastructures. This is stated in S&P Global Platts. That's it for this week. Tune in next week for more news, and until then, thanks for tuning in.